Yes. Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome today to this joint UN system side event on the topic of innovation. It's co-organized by UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and WFP, World Food Program, with contributions from the UN University and the International Telecommunication Union, ITU. Of course, the topic of innovation and entrepreneurship is central to any discussion on transformation toward decarbonized economies, or what we say transformative climate solutions. My name is Tariq Mtaira, and I'm the director of the Energy Department at UNIDO, and I will be moderating this session. So the way we will go around in terms of the agenda, we will have a keynote presentation to give us a context of what is the UN system doing around the topic of innovation and its role in transformative climate solutions. And then we have the pleasure to have with us distinguished speakers and panelists from different organizations. Joining us is Dirval Ushar, the head of the Jakarta Pulse Lab. It's the UN Global Pulse from Jakarta, yes, Indonesia. And then we have Katyusha Farah joining us from the World Food Program. She's a senior advisor on climate services. And then we have Joanne Kraveski, the general manager of the WDG Safety and the compliance and sustainability with Microsoft. Welcome, Joanne. And then we have also Lisa Groen from the UN University, a postdoctoral fellow with the UN University in Tokyo. So we will come back to our panelists with further questions for the topic. So as a start, I would like to invite the keynote speaker for the session that would give us a context for the role of the UN system on promoting innovation and entrepreneurship in the context of transformation or transition to low carbon economies and societies. With this, I'm very pleased to welcome and honored to have with us Mr. Lee Yong, the Director General of UNIDO. Welcome, Mr. Lee.
Thank you very much, Tariq. Good morning, colleagues, friends. It is a great privilege for me to welcome you to join UN system side event on innovation entrepreneurship for transformative climate change solutions. Firstly, I just would like to thank the co-organizers of the event, World Food Program, and also UNU, and International Telecommunication Union, and United Nations Global Pulse. We work together to have this side event, which would like to contribute to the COP23. Colleagues, friends, this event will allow us to inform you about the work of the United Nations in promoting innovative solutions that advance climate change action and thereby help us to achieve the Paris Agreement. The UN operations on the belief that climate action will provide economic, social development opportunities. UN entities work together to identify and apply innovative solutions for climate mitigations and adaptation that generate income and creating jobs in particular. The UN system also uses its convening power to facilitate a cross-sectoral and a multi-tiered discussion. It does so with a view to build climate-resilient economics, which include an important element, a sustainable ecosystem for the innovative entrepreneurship. It is therefore timely that we are able to showcase at today's event successful examples of how innovation and entrepreneurship promote affordable, scalable technology solutions. We aim to show how the UN system works with communities, as well as the startup companies and small, medium enterprises to help country leapfrog to a climate-resilient development pathway. And distinguished experts from the range of UN entities will also share their experiences in promoting innovation to address climate change. And they will cover a range of the areas of expertise, including food security, low-carbon technology transfer, digital connectivity, technology innovation, financing, and commercialization. They will also show how our work comes together for climate action sustainable development. Colleagues, friends, allow me to use this opportunity to also introduce you the work of UNIDO in promoting innovation and entrepreneurship for climate action. UNIDO has a mandate of promoting, accelerating industrial development that is inclusive and sustainable. We call it ISID in short. It is an integrated approach that addresses all three pillars of sustainable development: social, economic, and environmental. The importance of ISID is recognized in 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, particularly through the SDG Goal 9 out of 17 goals, and which calls to build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. The relevance of ISID is also reflected across all other industrial-related SDGs, in particular SDG 7 on sustainable energy and SDG 13 on climate change. That is common target for international community. We live at a time when the resource constraints and climate concerns are no longer externalities. It's really facing by every one of us, and where innovation is considered to be a driver of economic growth. Today's clean technology innovations will fuel the upcoming innovative trends that will shape tomorrow's global economy and job market. Therefore, we believe that with innovation and entrepreneurship at national level, countries can benefit from the profitable business models. They can not only provide a climate solution, but it can further catalyze economic growth and the social inclusiveness. At UNIDO, we are particularly committed to work with small medium enterprises, as we believe that these enterprises are backbone of a strong local economy. And due their flexibility, adaptability, scalability, and responsiveness, SMEs are well positioned to operate and innovative. They have the ability to transform market, create new industries, increase productivity, and drive efficiency gains in the areas of environmental sustainability and climate change. As part of panel discussion today, I look forward to telling you more about the clean tech innovations, which UNIDO's Global Clean Tech Innovation Program, in short as GCIP, had identified and supported. This will provide a demonstration of how dissemination and the commercialization of clean tech innovations translated into the new business model for social economic impact, especially job creation. And colleagues, friends, I'm also glad that we also have the opportunity to discuss key catalysts and challenges for innovation and entrepreneurship for climate action. Discussion will show the linkage between innovation, entrepreneurship, investment, and financing. We will also have the chance to explore how the UN as a team works with the government and the private sector partners to strengthen national policies can further attract investment in climate solution. In addition to this, we will also analyze the social economic impacts that clean tech innovation have on the local communities linked to their climate benefit, examples of the integrated impact on the environment that result from clean technology innovation cutting across multiple SDG will also be presented. Colleague friends, I'm looking forward to a rich and inspirational panel discussion on behalf of the UN United Nations Development System. Just would like to once again welcome you to this joint site event. I really appreciate your participation and also welcome any questions, comments during the discussion. Thank you very much once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee Yong, Director General of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. I think this is, gives us a relevant entry point to the discussion of the panel by sort of highlighting the importance of the UN system working together around the topic of innovation, as we all understand that we cannot continue to do business as usual. Incremental improvements generally have been argued that they will not deliver the kind of solutions in the form of either products or services or access to utilities that would actually put us on the path to 2 degrees or below 2 degrees. So incremental innovation is not often said not to be the solutions. We have to really reinvent the way we do things. We have to think differently. We have to approach the topic of innovation from a variety of perspectives, including perspectives that are not historically been considered, either in terms of who participate in the innovation, who takes part in the design and influence the solutions, new actors that are not traditionally part of the industrial system that often led the kind of innovations that we need to change. So I think the UN system partly comes at an important as an important interlocutor by bringing the kind of actors, networks, and partnership that probably can facilitate a different model and a different approach to innovation for transformative change. And in this context, we actually sort of, we're glad to have with us here both representations from UN system organizations, the World Food Program, the Pulse, and also the UN University, but also we have actual cases, entrepreneurs, and also private sector companies that are also important interlocutor in the innovation infrastructure, particularly the telecommunication. With this, I would like to start with our panelists by asking sort of I would like to start with our UN sister organizations or from the UN system with a 3 to 5 minute introduction and sort of on what is your organization doing in this context, and how do you sort of leverage your convening role to facilitate the kind of innovation and entrepreneurship in this arena. May I start with Katarina from the World Food Program? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to give a bit of an introduction also on the World Food Program and why we are looking at climate change. As the world's largest humanitarian organization fighting hunger worldwide, WFP is committed to a world with zero hunger by 2030. We know we cannot achieve this unless we address climate change, and as you just mentioned, we cannot go on as with business as usual. That is not an option anymore. Today, more than 80% of the world's most food insecure people, which is over 8 million people, live in countries which are prone to natural hazards, such as floods, droughts, cyclones, hurricanes, with high levels of poverty, high degraded environment, and very little resources. When climate shocks strike communities that are already vulnerable, it can very rapidly escalate to a nutrition and a food security crisis. People lose their assets, they lose lives, they lose livelihoods. They often have to resort to very negative coping strategies, which is keeping children from going to school, selling whatever they have left in terms of asset, reducing the amount of food that they take daily. Climate change is going to make this worse. We know that, and we are seeing it already, how some of the impacts include an increase in the number and the frequency of extreme weather events. Already this year alone, we have seen the damage that hurricanes Irma and Maria brought to the Caribbean. We have seen that in the Horn of Africa, there has been extensive drought for the past few years, exacerbated by El Nino that was the strongest in 50 years. This has led to 11 million people going hungry in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia. And floods in Nepal and Bangladesh have affected millions of people. In these two countries alone, 8 million people needed help. And these are just the big ones, the ones that actually make the news. There are what is really eroding people's capacity to recover from one event or the other is the succession of extreme and small-scale disaster events, one after the other. Now, on average, we have found that the World Food Program has to commit in terms of resources to answer to climate-related disasters about 2.3 billion per year. This is 1/3 of our total budget. When we look at then achieving zero hunger and reducing that, we realize that we need to move from only answering to reducing the risk, to strengthen resilience of those most vulnerable, and to really make sure that we manage and reduce the impact of disasters. To do this, innovation is key. Innovation and partnerships. And this is why for the past 5 to 7 years, we have invested a lot in piloting what have been very successful, if you want to say, climate innovations. And these include examples on forecast-based financing, on our climate and food security analysis with which we support government. It includes climate services which reach the last mile, communities with relevant information which are tailored to their needs. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that later. And our Rural Resilience Initiative, which includes micro-insurance. So this is just a brief introduction, and I know we're going to go into a bit more details later on.
Thank you, Katyusha. Yes, we have. I personally have many questions on the role of the World Food Program, especially when you mentioned $2.3 billion of procurement that you do annually, and I think that's for World Food Services. So
it's the money we spend in responding to climate-related disasters, events. So that's our response.
but also, so the actual investment even more than that, the procurement, which means that, okay, there's an important interlinkages with driving innovation through that huge amount of procurement. I want to take the discussion further with on what other UN agencies doing. I would like to give the floor to Dirval, Mr. Dirval, to share what the UN Global Pulse is doing in this.
Sure, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. UN Global Pulse is probably the one little kind of special unit within the UN that very few people know about. We're an innovation initiative of the Executive Office of the Secretary General. We've got 3 labs, so we work as labs, research labs, R&D labs to all intents and purposes. And what we do is we're looking at new forms of data and how we can harness those new forms of data for public good. We've got 3 labs based around the world. We've got the headquarters, obviously, in New York. We have a lab then in Jakarta, in Indonesia, which is where I'm based. And we have another one in Kampala, in Uganda. And so what we're trying to do basically is combine data science and human intelligence to help make sense of, you know, the interconnectivity and interdependence that we're facing now in the world. What we're looking at, as I said, is basically big data analytics and using new forms of data. We work very closely with government offices, ministries. We work very closely with UN development partners, together with private sector, to see what kind of solutions we can come up with on an experimental basis that can help to solve lots of different challenges, one, of course, being climate. I can give you some examples later on, I think, but essentially, I suppose we're trying to figure out, as datavores, we're very, very hungry for data and all forms of data, and we really feel that data is going to contribute to better evidence-based decision-making and putting better evidence in the hands of the decision makers so that they can take action when it's needed. We also feel very strongly that data has to be used responsibly and ethically. So that is something that we take into consideration as well. And so we do a lot of work around data privacy. I guess I'll stop there, and I can talk about some examples later on.
Thank you. Thank you, Dirval. The topic of data is also important to our to the work we do, also as UNIDO, and in the sense that when we work on sustainable cities, the agenda is heavily connected to big data, and there's a lot of critical questions that come up there. Who sits on that assets? Who should sit on that asset? And what is an inclusive model for managing these kind of assets? We would like to come back to that question. And it's a good question to connect also with our colleagues from Microsoft here as well. So I would like to move with to UN University and invite Lisanne Groen from the UN University to let us to share with us some thoughts on what the UN University is doing on promoting entrepreneurship and innovation in the context of transformative climate solutions.
Thank you for your introduction. So I'm Lisanne. I'm working as a postdoctoral researcher in Tokyo at the United Nations University Institute for the Advanced Study of Sustainability. So we are a research institution. And we work on a project that is called Low Carbon Technology Transfer. And there we study the transfer of technologies from developed to developing countries. So we look at France, Germany, the UK, the US and Japan, and how they transfer technologies mainly to Southeast Asian countries. We have a focus on Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, and also India. What we have done so far is to map different partnerships and matchmaking initiatives in the area of low carbon technology transfer. And by low carbon technology transfer, I mean the transfer of hardware. So for example, solar panels, but also the transfer of software, namely skills and knowledge that is related to the hardware. The different partnerships we have mapped are industry partnerships, for example, in the steel or cement sector. Also, national governments working together, for example, in mission innovation on clean energy R&D, and also public-private partnerships, for example, on clean cook stoves or district energy in cities. And then next to those partnerships where knowledge is exchanged, there are also specific matchmaking initiatives. And matchmaking initiatives, they try to bring partners together. So for example, partners that have technology and those partners that want to use this technology. So there is the CTCN within the UNFCCC, the Climate Technology Center and Network, where countries, developed countries offer services that developing countries can use. And then there's also the World Intellectual Property Organization's initiative on licenses, to share licenses on green technology. And what we found in these partnerships, what is useful, what is important, is that the sharing of information is really crucial for building trust among parties and legitimacy. However, it's sometimes difficult to provide full, comprehensive information on all the different technology options that are available and to assess the real needs of partners. But a deep knowledge exchange is important. Then joint R&D efforts are also important between developed and emerging developing countries to reduce the costs of technologies at the early innovation stage and to share lessons, and that can also make technology transfer more sustainable in the long run. It's also important to realize that there's a need for localization of technology. Often it's being developed in developed countries and then transferred to developing countries. And in developing countries, there's a different context, so the technologies have to be adapted to that context. And to do that, it's also very important that developing countries are being offered capacity building support to really develop the skills to use these technologies. And also, next to that, the right enabling environment has to be created, meaning that local rules have to be adapted, technical standards, and also local financial institutions have to be taught how to be aware of new technologies. And finally, what I think is the main, the key lesson we would like to transfer in this presentation is there's a need for long-term reflexive engagement strategies. So from transfer, we need to move to cooperation. It's about cooperation with all the relevant local stakeholders, and also long-term time horizons are important if feasible. And if we look at the technology cycle, there are still several gaps that have to be addressed, from research to development to demonstration to market formation and to diffusion. And it's very important to look at the technology cycle as a whole to address all those gaps.
Thank you, Lisa, for this. I'd like to follow up from that and move to our guest on the panel from Microsoft and from, joined us later, Karim Al-Alami, co-founder of Al-Ulum Energy. So before moving to Karim, I want to start with Joanne first. So please, I mean, I think that Microsoft is doing quite, as a large corporation, you have probably a central role in the way you drive cutting-edge innovations, especially the interlinkages also with ICT. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit what you do in that area.
Yes, I'd be delighted to. Thank you so much for having me here As a result of the inspirational words already spoken by my fellow panelists, I think I'm going to talk about something different than what I actually was going to begin with. So thank you so much for your inspiration. So I wanted to sort of address two issues. One is the issue of innovation itself, and then secondly, the issue of making that innovation available to others in crossing the digital divide, which is a huge issue in terms of sustainable development and our evolving economies and stresses that we face throughout the world as a result of climate change impacts. With respect to innovation itself, and this leads into why I want to discuss the second issue, is that the pace of digital transformation that we're facing globally is accelerating dramatically beyond what many of us can possibly imagine. Even working within Microsoft for the past 12 years, the pace of digital change of the past 2 years has been phenomenal. If you really think about the proliferation now of sensor technology and the data that this brings to us, and the fact that we're now approaching parity for everyone having a phone, the pace, you can just actually measure it on a daily basis now. And what really concerns me is that with the Internet of Things, the beautiful data that it brings to us to be able to do predictive machine learning and analytics, and also it brings to us the ability to use augmented reality for design, to do simultaneous translations so that people can talk to each other via tools like Skype and communicate. You know, all these tools that we have now, and now we're entering into an era of quantum computing, which is with all these qubits. You're probably the only person who understands what I mean on this. You know, this new technology, it's going to accelerate even more. For example, one of the programs that we have for researchers in academia is artificial intelligence for Earth. Artificial intelligence basically means that you're taking a lot of data and then you're translating that data, essentially expanding what a human could do through these artificial neural pathways, text to speech, speech to text, recognizing visual images, you know, all the things that you could do as a human, but the computer can do it faster, quicker, and now in terms of speech recognition, just as accurately as a human could do listening to another human. So all these fundamental breakthroughs can be used in this AI for Earth technology, and one example is in being able to look at global mapping, because we're able to take maps of the globe taken from satellites and photosynth them together in one really detailed image of the globe, and then use AI for Earth visual recognition technology to identify marshlands, wetlands, cement, the type of structure. Then you could take a square mile and say, within this particular square mile, what is the resiliency of that square mile to distribute to a storm event or to a drought? And you could take that technology and enable people to then use history of climate change and map that together with predictive analytics so that people can become more resilient and actually forecast, you know, what is going to happen to farmers, to business owners, to residences, and so on and so forth. And as we look at the pace, and as we look at this situation, having predictive analytics, having big data is more and more crucial, because as was mentioned by the panel, the speed of climate change events is increasing. So for many organizations, such as NGOs and academia and others, it's really overwhelming. It's overwhelming to address these issues. And so that's why it's so important to take advantage of the computational technology that we have to allow people to be more resilient and to take advantage of the data. And that's why we have certain partnerships that we proliferate with the UN, for example, organizations, academia, and others to be able to harness this technology and move more quickly, because we need to move more quickly. I mean, it's absolutely essential. Now, I want to move to the second topic that I wish to raise, and that is crossing the digital divide, which is an issue that I'm personally quite passionate about. At the same time that we have at companies like Microsoft and other technology companies this amazing proliferation of big data and all these benefits that are going to be enjoyed by many, there are many who do not have access to these benefits, because the access to these cloud digital benefits comes to an individual if they're going to access and be an entrepreneur or an innovator themselves, or to respond quickly themselves. It comes to them via the cloud and then via some type of broadband network. And in order to have the broadband network, you have to have electricity. You know, it's an essential. And there are many people throughout the world who simply do not have basic necessity, which is electricity. And that's why Microsoft is teaming with others and looking at issues such as impact investing, and really supporting microgrids and the use of grid technology. That technology has decreased in cost considerably. And it's really important that we take advantage of the lower cost of solar to be able to provide people a basic level of electricity. And there are many amazing impact investing entrepreneurs who are going out into rural areas and making this type of technology available to people. And it's fantastic. But that doesn't connect to us to the cloud. Having electricity is not enough. And so we're also working on another project, and that is to connect the unconnected, which is, we believe, is critical to cross the digital divide and to lessen the gap of the people who have access to technical innovations and those who do not, but yet could badly use them. So there are three ways that we proposing to do this, and we really need the help of policymakers. We need partnerships with the UN. We need partnerships with entrepreneurs, with other private companies like telcos and so forth, to provide the connections. And the three ways we propose to do it is for areas that only have 0 to 2 people per square mile. You really can't expect the telephone companies to run fiber optics to everyone's home. That's just not going to happen. So we propose a different sort of technology that makes connectivity available, and that's through satellite technology, because then you could reach more areas, and a person could have a satellite receiver, assuming they have electricity, and then they could be connected mobily to a decent quality internet. The second way, for populations of 2 to 200 persons per square mile, we propose to use what we call TV white spaces to take advantage of the unused radio frequencies that are used for televisions. Every country has them, and use those instead for TV, for white spaces and for radio frequencies that allow people to receive an internet connection. And finally, for populations where there are 200 and above per square mile, then a legitimate solution would be fiber optics. And that's an issue where the government can join with us to ensure that the connected are able to connect. They're able to take advantage of the information and communication and technology entrepreneurship availability. They're able to take advantage then of the information that allows them to be resilient, such as a farmer, for example, is so critical. And they can take advantage of these different models for education and translation and being globally connected to the economy. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan, and thank you for actually, as one of my colleagues said, splitting the hair on the topic of innovation between the harnessing the changes and the trends that are happening to make actually a more transformative solution, but also on the other side, the access and the inclusiveness part of it, where the others can be connected to it. I think also the harnessing part is a relevant discussion for UN system organization, because that's also where we can deliver better services, we can deliver more targeted support to our member states. We can sort of move to that discussion, but I want to, before moving to that, I want to invite Karim from Al-Ilum. You're an entrepreneur, an innovator, from a context maybe that is could be characterized as challenging from an innovation system point of view. Well, share your experience with us. What are you doing in this area?
Hello everyone, and thank you for the invitation. So I'm Karim El Alami, so I'm co-founder of Ilum Energy. So we are developing an artificial intelligence software. We talked about artificial intelligence. So we are using artificial intelligence to monitor and control solar plus battery systems. As discussed before, there are tremendous changes in renewable energy. Is it that the cost of the solar panel are decreasing fast? So the price of solar panels has been divided by 5 in 5 years, which is completely unimaginable, like in 2010, 2012. And also that the cost of the battery are falling now because of new installations such as Tesla with the new Gigafactory, or the new releases in China or in Germany about like electric vehicles. So there is a huge change in renewable energy. And this is also good for the planet because, of course, like there are less emittive solution and less carbon emission solution for us. And for the first time, like this, solar plus battery assets are economically viable compared to other systems such as the grid in some geographies, or diesel generators. We talk about microgrids, we talk about people that does not have access to electricity. So there are 800 million people, approximately 600 million are in Africa, and the others are essentially like in India or in the subcontinent of India. So basically, like there are a lot of people that does not have access to electricity. So we can move faster and we can move forward in order to electrify those people and electrify those people cheaply. So what we do exactly is that we are able, in fact, to do the software that is able to allocate the energy, like effectively the energy between the solar panels, the batteries, and for example, the diesel generators, in order to reduce the fuel consumption of the diesel generators. And how we do it? By only the data. So basically we collect the data coming from the production, we collect the data coming from the consumption, we collect the data coming from the battery, we know like what is the charging state of the battery, etc. And then we decide like which policy to applicate, whether we charge the battery, whether we switch on the diesel generator, whether to do other kind of policy in order to reduce the fuel consumption and make it more viable for those people. So thanks to in fact like those data, we are able to reduce like approximately by 20% like the fuel consumption, which is tremendous, especially that we don't install like any more devices, we don't install anything, and we only operate it on existing systems. And this is particularly what we do. And you discussed like about difficulties, like of course about launching this new state, is that like energy sector is of course changing and changing fast, But the thing is that the energy sector, like due to the reliability issues, like we have, they have more to lose than to gain, and this is I think a big point to consider, because of course, like if you change the system or how you allocate the energy, usually they say, okay, but like if there is a blackout, who is responsible for that? And like, is it like your software? Is it like my component? Is it that you are using like the component differently, etc.? So they are very risk averse to the different changes, and of course, like things are changing and things are changing fast. But like we have like maybe some challenges to tackle in the next years in order, of course, to develop and to make it more efficient, more green, and more distributed energy.
Thank you, Karim. Interesting to know as well that again the same topic rises again, and innovators face the challenge of breaking through the existing systems often. I want to come back to our panelists on the question that Juan raised on harnessing the pace of change that is taking place in the innovation arena, particularly with digitization and data-driven innovation. Are we in the UN system doing enough to harness this? Are we actually capitalizing on these opportunities and partnerships? I want to throw the question to Katyusha first, and then come back to the Pulse. Especially, what is the World Food Program? How is the World Food Program benefiting from the changes that is happening in the innovation to deliver solutions that are more efficient to the member state?
So, I think I'll take two examples, in particular how we support communities in their adaptation efforts. The one example is the work that we do on climate services. So today there are still several countries and vulnerable communities that don't have access to basic climate and weather information. And in Malawi and Tanzania, in a project that was funded by Norway, the Adaptation Program for Africa, together with other partners, WFP activities focus on how do we strengthen direct access to this type of information for farmers, pastoralists, so that they can take better decisions on the livestock, the agricultural production, but the livelihoods in general. Now, the first step in our case is always to understand the context and the needs. And we start at community level. And then once we understood what information people needed, what did they have, what they did not have, and how they wanted it to be communicated, we work with them to find solutions. And not only with them, with private sector as well. And the government, of course. We developed a sort of three-pronged approach in which we supported training of the extension services so that they would be able to understand, to access, and to communicate this information to local communities. And we're also developing, together with University of Reading and a private company, a specific app to help them. At the same time, and what communities told us is that they reach information also through mobile phones and radios. So we consulted with the Med Services, with the Ministry of Agriculture, with different radio providers as well, and mobile phones, and we created tailored radio programs that have a weekly frequency in which they are tailored to a specific area, so a specific district, and we have invited guests. Which are usually Ministry of Agriculture experts. So the farmers can call in for free and ask questions. It's something called Beep for Weather. They just call, they get a call back, and that is quite interactive in the sense they can call they can ask their questions, which are quite specific. And not everybody has electricity, and there is no radio cover everywhere. So we provided also solar-powered radios and created listening groups so that each person in that group would then have the task of relaying the information to other 20 people, making sure the women were also part of the group. And the SMS complements that. And so in doing that, we designed this both with the communities, which are our clients, but also with the national providers to see what was available and what not. And we were able then to tailor it to the solution. In Malawi, we work with Zodiac, which is the national radio broadcasting. In Tanzania, that was not possible, so we work with community radios. And that brings their own set of challenges that maybe I can discuss more later. A second example is our 4, which is our rural resilience initiatives, which is now active in 5 countries. And it's an integrated risk management approach, which combines disaster risk reduction, savings, and insurance. The innovative part of R4 is that it enables the poorest farmers to pay for crop insurance through their labor. So farmers can access insurance through the labor. It's called Insurance for Asset Schemes. And so what happens, and it's happened already, when a drought hits, there is a compensation for weather-related losses. And because of that, it also enables farmers to be able to access credit because they have an insurance, and also to take a little bit more risks because they know that they can invest maybe a bit more in fertilizers or other inputs that are needed. And then, through this process, we graduate the farmers. So first you test it. They see the benefit. We pay. They pay with the labor. And then slowly, as the yields improve, as they're starting to earn a higher income, they start to cover part of the insurance until they will be able to cover all of it, and then we can start with a different group of farmers. So, and again here, the role of the private sector was essential in terms of the different insurance companies, because we had to work with them for the development of specific products, insurance products, for the distribution, the management, the training, the awareness raising. For WFP, the focus is never on just a project of a pilot. It's on building capacities at the country level and systems so that, once it's graduated, we leave it behind. And for that, you need to invest a lot in building those capacities at country level.
Thank you, Katyusha. I think if I can also read from the second example is also there's an element of business model innovation combined with data, large data input. So it's again here it's the business model innovation that comes into the play, and if we want to talk about bridging the divide, we also need to sort of put a bit more emphasis on this kind of type of low cost, but also business model innovation to deliver services at a low cost to countries where they cannot afford it. But I want to move to Dirval, and again, the same issue, the challenge that Joanne put us through is the how do we sort of harness and leverage the role of the UN system in harnessing sort of the pace of change that is taking place in the technological, on the innovation arena.
Yeah, so being based in the Asia Pacific region, I mean, we're very privy to a lot of digital data. We're very lucky actually to have such a wealth of digital data throughout the Asia Pacific region. We work very closely with our UN partners and also with governments. And one example I think that I can further on from yours is a system that we established together with World Food Programme and the Food and Agriculture Organization in Indonesia on, it's called Vampire. And I'm struggling to remember what Vampire actually stands for, but it's the Vulnerability Analysis Monitoring Platform for the Impact of Regional Events. There you go, that's Vampire. But essentially what it is, it's a system that uses multiple data sources to track changes in environmental conditions and the impact of food security in Indonesia. And so it's a platform essentially that it has integrated map-based visualizations that's showing the extent of rainfall anomalies, so that's either drought or floods, and the impacts of markets and also the resilience of affected populations. So it's 3 layers: baseline data, climate layer, and impact, so the economic vulnerability and the exposure to drought. Now, what it actually means, or what the impact of this is, that it gives the government a real-time awareness awareness tool of the evolving nature of slow onset climate phenomena such as El Nino. So that means that they have a system in place. So the government of Indonesia currently has a system in place where they can actually track where rainfall anomaly is happening, where population-based, which are vulnerable to, which are particularly vulnerable, which are very dependent on agriculture, and where when you overlay all of that data and when you're automating the analysis, it gives a real-time tool as to where government should direct their resources. So I think that is, it's something that is ongoing. It's currently up and running in Indonesia. It has been what we call franchised through WFP to Sri Lanka, and it's on its way as well to the South Pacific. Some other examples, we have a cyclone monitoring system in the South Pacific, which again is feeding back information on cyclones, but it's also allowing us to engage directly with citizens to get their understanding, or for us to get understanding of how citizens are becoming more aware and becoming more resilient, particularly when they're working coastal communities. We're also, again, with ITU, with UNU as well, working on looking at anonymized mobile phone data, where we can actually track populations' mobility. So where are people moving to and from when it comes to climate impact? So if there is a climate event, can we actually track where people are moving to and from? So it allows government to make better decisions on how they target their resources. I have plenty more examples. I'll stop there.
I think again that it's a challenge for us to work with this as UN organization, because I also in my department, where we try to deliver energy service solutions to some of our member states in Africa, where we try also to leverage the opportunities. One example in which we do technology demonstration, the technology tend to be, let's say, heavily dependent on operation and maintenance, and then we try to couple that with a remote monitoring and servicing. But then we face the dilemma is that the recipient country doesn't want that. For fear of, okay, who controls the installation? Do you have any tips for us? What are your suggestions in these situations? I mean, because it says, okay, all the data goes back to the exporting country. They control the operation and maintenance. They control what's called the Internet of Things, if you wanted to do actually remote servicing. Do you have examples of how you overcome some of these kind of challenges? Yeah, any of the panelists.
Needless to say, this is something that Microsoft addresses all the time with governments throughout the world, and data security and privacy are paramount issues to the company. So there are ISO standards that apply to data centers for data security, and standards that must be met in order to create a secure cloud. And basically, Microsoft adheres to those standards. That's how we do it. And there are other issues associated with energy, having backup energy available. And interestingly enough, for Kareem, I was thinking when you're talking about energy security, one of the things that Microsoft has done recently in terms of that data and data centers is entered into a deal with the state of Wyoming, where we agreed that should their grid go down for energy security, that they could use our backup energy from our data center, because it was less expensive for us to partner together in that way than for them to build another power plant. So there are all these kind of innovative partnerships that you can get into that are extremely beneficial to local governments that you never dreamed possible.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on to that question about we work very closely with governments on what is actually useful for the governments. So we're not going in to build systems, and I think WFP and all of my UN colleagues would actually say the same. We're not actually going in to supplant a solution that we have just come up with. We actually design a solution that's actually working hand in hand with the government and how they will actually use it. So we contextualize solutions. We don't. It's just not a one solution fits all type of model. It's very much contextualized. You know, we are a big data analytics lab, and I'm hugely in favor of big data and artificial intelligence, but I really don't think it's going to replace the human intelligence. So we still need, and we have a part of our team, we have human-centered design specialists, where, you know, if we see anomalies in data, if we see something that's worth investigating, we then send in the human-centered design specialist to actually figure out what's going on with that data. Why are we seeing these anomalies? Big data will tell you how, it won't tell you why, and we need to investigate more of why that's happening. And that could be hand in hand with the government counterparts as well, because they know the context, they know the domain, it's their country, they understand it better than we do. And so that's how we work together with the government.
Yeah, Kareem, quickly on this. And I need to also move to the second part of the here, which is the access and the bridging the divide. But let's take the point here quickly.
Yeah, I will add like some few points, like especially about the monitoring system, which we are dealing with, for example, telecommunication towers, because like they have to deal with the maintenance system, and they say, okay, we have an issue about like you are collecting all the data coming from us, and this is like your proposition value, and especially that the data can be stored outside our country. So we have to deal with those issues. But the thing is that first, usually like when you say, okay, we will help you to reduce the maintenance, like usually your clients say, okay, I don't like the fact that you criticize my maintenance, how you do it, and how it should. So the different solutions that we say is, okay, as I said before, we can, thanks to the monitoring part, we can help you to solve other issues that are, for example, a lot of African countries are moving to intermittent energy. It means that your grid is unstable. So if you have, like, for example, a lot of backups, a lot of batteries installed, thanks to your monitoring system, you know exactly instantaneously where you can help the grid in order to do this. And this can be also can create value for the client, and can create also value for the monitoring system done. So moreover, like the maintenance part is important, but also can this monitoring part and this data part can also access to new services that were not accessible before. So here we say, okay, we move from the security part to more the economical part, and this is what everybody understands usually.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that experience. I think part of the discussion on innovation and innovation ecosystem for climate solutions, Joanne put it very nicely when she sort of said, okay, there is the divide that is sort of, it's partly one could argue that it's driven by the digital divide, that is people with access to communication infrastructure versus people without access to communication infrastructure. We could also turn the argument around and say that the convergence of certain technologies would allow the delivery of low-cost innovations in locations and spaces and geographies that really didn't have that opportunity before. I want to put the question to Lisa from the UN University, because you raised that also in your sort of, we need to be inclusive in the way we bring innovation to spaces and contexts in which really people have not participated in this. And particularly on if we talk about energy access, access to basic services, would allow us to actually even, before even we move to entrepreneurship and business development or industrialization in some of these countries. So What is your intake on here? What are the good examples of promoting innovation climates or innovation ecosystem for low-cost innovation solutions?
Yeah, if you attend the negotiations here in the rooms on technology and on capacity building, you see that for many African countries, it's really important that the technologies have to be transferred to them, because if the Paris Agreement implementation it should be successful, and if we want a successful implementation, we need the technology transfer. So developed countries, they have the technologies available. So what I said in my initial presentation, that there is a need for localization of this technology. When developed country partners come in with their support, it's often through the development agencies. So for example, the GIZ in Germany, they are promoting low carbon technology transfer, I think in a quite interesting way, often also a successful way, because they have now built up so much experience already over time, that they have developed a quite inclusive approach. And what they do is not only to bring the technology to an area where it hasn't been used before, but then also to work together with the local stakeholders to see how can the technology be adapted to the local context. And they use a long-term approach. So they also work when a technology is demonstrated in demonstration projects. They at the same time already work on building an enabling environment, so already to put the right rules and technical standards in place for the technology then to be able to really roll out at a larger scale. I think that kind of inclusive approach is very important, because if you just bring in the technology and there's not enough local support and the rules are, for example, if it's about public procurement, are blocking the technology from really being used at a large scale, then it cannot be successful.
Thank you, Lisa. I want to bring it to you, Derval. Your experiences, how, I mean, especially with the data mining and sensors, does it offer a sort of an alternative model to let's say, coming with through multinationals coming in and doing the kind of solutions that you're talking about?
No, I think everything is complementary. So, you know, with big data analytics, we're not out to replace any existing intervention that's going on. We work closely with National Bureau of Statistics, for example, on surveys. You know, maybe big data analytics can provide a better or basically a real-time analysis of what's going on right now, as opposed to waiting for data coming from the next census in 5 or 10 years' time. We also work very closely with multinationals, and we partner, of course, with a lot of companies on contribution of data. So we think data philanthropy is hugely important as well going forward. You know, it's all about localization. I completely agree with Lisanne here, and it's about using whatever the data sources that are available on the ground. So in Indonesia, as I said, we have a huge, you know, there's a massive amount of digital data available, but of course that's available on the island of Java, you know, with 110 million people. There's still 140 other million people in Indonesia that maybe are not, you know, as digitally savvy as Java Island, for example. And there we use other approaches. You know, we work very closely with local governments on building up capacity of acting on their own data. We have a lab in Kampala in Uganda who look at, for example, radio mining. So how to actually use artificial intelligence to pick out keywords from local radio. So it's really about contextualization and localization in order to kind of build from from what we already have, what's there. So we're not generating anything new. We're basically data mining what already exists.
Thank you. Juan, yeah?
If I could just add a point, just at a very basic level, if people or children, for example, we found have access to mobile computing, the internet, their grade point average will increase by 1 point in 1 year. I mean, it's just a very dramatic difference. And, you know, when you look at people who are really impoverished and, you know, doing artisanal mining or farming at a subsistence level, there has to be a way for their children to be educated so that they could fulfill their hopes and dreams to do other things. Whether it's in the information communication technology field, to be an entrepreneur, or to do anything, and to get delivery of health services, to get delivery of education, you know, very, you know, information, more sophisticated information regarding farming and advice on, you know, fertilizers, et cetera. And so having that connectivity in and of itself without giving them these other more sophisticated tools that we are using and developing is just so helpful.
Thank you, Juan. I'm looking at the timer, and we were very close to the limits of our time, which didn't allow us also to open the panel for discussion with the audience. My apologies for that. But I think two key points that emerge from this for us is, one is that at least in the kind of organization where I work with, and probably most of my colleagues, climate solutions as sort of are integrally linked with economic development, jobs, businesses, and basic, sort of a climate solution has to be intimately linked with providing basic needs in many parts of the world. And more we see, I mean, if we put the agenda of climate solutions to some of our member states 5-6 years ago, the enthusiasm would have not been as it is today. Today we see actually most of the countries we work with in Africa and Asia and Latin America, they want to work with the climate agenda because also they see it's linked to entrepreneurship, it's linked to innovation, it links to the delivery of the kind of solution that opens opportunities for businesses, for entrepreneurs. And I think we need to harness this. And as a UN system organization working with development agenda, we need to leverage and drive the innovation space in these countries, in those countries that can leverage that. And that where we can make the best sort of selling for our role as UN agencies, especially on that link between innovation, entrepreneurship, and creating downstream benefits to local communities, either in terms of jobs, new businesses, and new anyways. So it will always be a continuous struggle for us to find what we call low-cost innovation opportunities, create an ecosystem for entrepreneurs where maybe the logistics and the infrastructure are not as developed as it is happening in other countries. So with this note, I think the conversation continue. We want to take the conversation even further. We still have another sort of session later on during the day where we actually look at more concrete examples of entrepreneurs coming from different countries where we have these innovation and entrepreneur support program, the clean tech support programs. And this is happening today in the evening at around, well, not in the evening, but at 6:30 at the Moroccan Pavilion, where we actually take the conversation a little bit farther in terms of looking at some of these cases where we can sort of get a sense of what happened in these ecosystems of 5-6 countries in terms of innovation ecosystem to support clean tech entrepreneurs on those countries. So I invite you to join that discussion. Yesterday also we had another discussion on Industry 4.0 and how this could also be harnessed to deliver solutions to decarbonize economies. So the opportunities are there, the conversation continue, and I want to take this opportunity to thank our panelists for joining us on this. Thank you very much, and thank you for taking part with us also on this session. Thank you.